This inspection was a doozy. Life safety issues, rot, structural issues, water issues. It's got everything included. You do not want to miss this episode. Hey everybody, this is Deb from Deb's RV Services. If you are new here, welcome. Today I'm going to talk about an inspection that I recently did in the Phoenix area that was absolutely crazy. And I was hired by somebody that was out of state and wanted me to go take a look at an RV that was at a lot that was like a dealership, but not really a dealership. He was just somebody that like buys up RVs and calls himself a dealer and then sells them off his lot. We're going to break this up into 4 different parts. We're going to talk about the exterior, the life safety issues, the interior, and then all the electrical issues that I found. And you do not want to miss that part. So let's get started. So I was looking at the exterior of this and I went on the roof. And right before I even got on the roof, I noticed that there were all these scuff marks around the sidewall. Well, they're actually more the trim of the sidewall. So up near the roof, there's like a trim piece and you have trim along the driver's side and the passenger side. There were all these scuff marks on the driver's side of it. So it looked like it maybe had gotten hit or something. And then I looked over and on the passenger side, there was like a gouge, like a rip right in the material of the sidewall. And it just, it looked really weird to me. Like I wasn't sure what happened, but obviously there was some kind of accident. So there were all those things. There were some areas that were kind of like smashed in a little bit. And then when I was looking on the roof, there were so many sealant issues, like major sealant issues, severe gapping, and especially at the corners. So you have like these end caps that you have, like you'll have the front cap and the rear cap. So over at the rear cap, there were many gaps in sealant. It really didn't look good. And there were holes in the sealant. I don't think the sealant had been maintained hardly at all. And even at the sunroof, there was a sunroof over at the front cap area. And that had a lot of old yellowing sealant that was cracking, and you could see that it had like broken off. So I would say that all needed to be replaced. And there was also some gaps at the other sunroof that was over the bathroom, and you could see there were gaps and holes in the sealant there. So lots of sealant issues on the roof that needed to be taken care of, and a lot of areas that I thought like some kind of accident had happened. When I got down from the roof, I was looking at the whole exterior and looking at the sealant there. And there were so many areas of cracked sealant, holes in the sealant, and like various things like cracks in that plastic that goes around a headlight had like shattered crack marks in it. Both of the headlights had that. There were also marker lights that didn't work correctly. But one of the areas that really interested me was at the cab over you have the front cap where the chassis meets the RV, and that's like that cab over. There's an area there that there's sealant and it's fastened together, and the whole area had one big gap. It was a gap between that cab over and where it meets the chassis part of the RV. And the sealant was missing, but it went along the entire line there. And I just felt like at this point, there were a lot of red flags already in this inspection. When I inspected the slide out, I was looking underneath, and I always look at the slide out floor. I run the slides in and out to make sure that it runs appropriately. Well, at the slide out floor, it looked like it was good, like there was no signs of rot until I went towards the rear of it and I noticed that it looked a little thicker. So I take my hand and run it across that area, and you can feel like it feels like a lump. So it's like expanded wood underneath. So that's definitely a sign of where water intrusion got in and it rotted the wood. So, and you guys, this is only the beginning of what I found. One of the cargo areas wouldn't open because the locking mechanism didn't work anymore. So it was permanently in the locked position. And then in the rear cargo area, there were some seals that they weren't sealing anymore. So I would say replace those and have them repaired. And then the main door didn't even lock. So I always test that the doors lock. And what I do it in 2 ways. I'm testing it I open up the door and I actually physically turn the lock to see that the locking mechanism comes out. And then I go on the inside and I close the door and lock it. And I can see if it actually works or not. Well, the locking mechanism came out on the exterior part when I tested it that way. But when I closed the door and I locked it, it did not lock. So that needed to be written up, and that's why it's important to test it in both ways. I was not able to fully test the awning because this guy had the RV parked so close to another RV that it was only like, I was only able to bring it out like inches. And that was not enough to fully test an awning. And the only thing I can do is mark that down on my report and let the client know that I can't fully test the awning to see how the fabric is and how it comes out, if it deploys all the way and then comes back in all the way. Number 2, let's talk about life safety items. Oh boy. So this thing had 2020 tires. So naturally, I'm like, okay, they're 5 years old, but that's not the only problem with these tires. These tires had a lot of checking on them. So if they were, say, dated, say they were only 4 years old and they had this checking on them, I would be still writing this up because that is a huge indicator that they are rotted and they rot from the inside out. So if you're seeing that checking on there, I would definitely change out my tires. So these were 5 years old, they were dated 2020, and they had this checking on them. But the other thing is that the PSI, the pressure in the tires, were so low, they were not anywhere near appropriate or roadworthy. And what I noticed is on the front tire that the wear was completely uneven. It was like it was worn on the outside and then the inside it wasn't as worn. And this is something that I would not even drive on this. Now, interestingly enough, I had to have this guy go fill up propane for me because when I arrived on the scene, and I'll get to this later, but he did not have propane in there. So he actually drove this out. And I can't believe anybody would drive on these tires that were super low. This is literally a blowout waiting to happen. So the tires all needed to be replaced and that needed to be written up. And if this person purchased this RV, I wouldn't even want him driving this to a tire place. These would need to be replaced prior to him even getting behind the wheel for life safety issues. Now, the other thing is the carbon monoxide and LP detector were outdated. That did not surprise me in the least. I mean, if all these other things weren't maintained, they're certainly not going to change out a carbon monoxide LP detector, right? So those all needed to be replaced. And let's talk about propane since we're on the subject. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the background of what happened. I arrived at this location and there was no gas in the tank, there was no propane in the tank, and he only had it on 110. So that meant that I had to be really careful because he even told me that the breakers pop easily running it off of the 110, so I couldn't test the air conditioner or anything like that. But we had a generator, so I was like, okay, well, I can't run the generator if there's no propane in the system. I can't test the furnace if there's no propane in the system. There was no gas in the engine, so and the generator ran off propane anyway. I mean, these are the reasons why I need all of the requirements that I send out met, because I can't test things and it really, one bad thing leads to another. So he had to go out and get propane and bring it back. And then when he did, I was able to run the generator. Well, the problem is that there was no way for me to do a propane leak test. And that's the one thing I wanted to do, is I wanted to do a propane leak test on the system because I kind of smelled propane at the generator. And I knew that they just added propane, but it doesn't matter. I smelled propane. But I couldn't do a leak test because the stove was induction and there was no external port. So the other life safety item that I write up is it's really important to get this to a person that's like a propane specialist. So there's people that are certified in propane. They learn a lot more than I learned in school. I only learned how to test it from 2 areas. And if those 2 areas can't be tested, then you have to go find a propane specialist to do it. So this needed to be tested. I smelled propane. I didn't trust anything at this point with the system. I didn't trust that any maintenance had been done. Even looking at the generator, it didn't look like the oil had been changed recently. It was low on oil. So and there's other things that you're going to hear about when we get to electrical that are going to be an indicator on why there were a lot of things wrong with this RV. So let's get into number 3, the interior portion, along with the water systems. This does not disappoint either. So I went on the inside and I run all the water systems and test to make sure it works and that there's no leaks and that it runs on hot water and cold water. Well, the bathroom area had a leak right at the faucet, and the toilet area had a leak behind the toilet. But the other thing is I could hear the pump running like sporadically, continuously. So if it's not holding pressure and it has to keep filling up, then there's a leak somewhere else. So I'm kind of running around frantically looking to see where the leak is coming from. And I figured, let's go to the exterior because sometimes some of those valves are open and maybe it's just releasing the tank water. I don't know. I went outside and I finally found the leak, and it was coming from the tank. So it was actually leaking from the tank itself. So now we have 3 leaks for the water system. And would you buy this RV at this point? I went ahead and looked around the rest of the interior, and a lot of it is going to be talked about in the electrical section. But one thing I wanted to talk about is I couldn't run the furnace because now it's 100 degrees. And let me get to a very important tip that I want to bring up for anybody that wants an inspection is, or maybe you're an inspector watching this, but always start your inspection super early in the morning. And that's what I normally do. I always request 9 a.m. appointments, at least, if that's the first available. This inspection, the dealer, which he called himself a dealer, like I want to talk about this too. So I'm going to talk about two things right here. I'm going to talk about the fact that he wasn't a regular dealer. He was somebody that bought up RVs and sold them from a lot. I want you to be cautious of people like that because a lot of times they find RVs out there that haven't been sold. And this is I've had a few inspections like this and they've kind of all turned out rotten. And like a regular dealer, established dealership, like you have your General RV, your La Mesas, Blue Compass, regular dealerships, they will have RVs on the lot. They have new and used RVs. If they can't sell their RVs or somehow these other little shops that are not, they're not established shops. They're kind of like you'll find an RV for sale and it'll be like a lot. And it's not really like an established company. It doesn't seem to be. They will sell these RVs and they pick up projects and then they try to sell them for a cheap price. So just beware of these cheaper RVs out there that are on these lots that don't look like established RV dealerships. This person didn't want me to come to the location until the afternoon because they're out during the day looking for RVs. I can't do that. I have to start my inspection early so that I can do things like test the furnace before it gets hot. Well, he wouldn't do it any earlier than 11 o'clock a.m., so that was the compromised time. And when I got there, none of the systems, he didn't have any propane or gas. I couldn't test anything. So I had to wait for him to then go and fill up, get some propane in the tank so that I could then try to run the furnace, do the propane, do all the things, run the generator. By then, it's already too hot. Now, I can't even get the furnace to turn on because it's in excess of 100 degrees. And what you'll find out in the electrical section is the air conditioner didn't work. The other part of the interior that was really odd was that it was missing half of the bathroom door. Really? So like there are two sections to it and only one section was there and the other section was completely missing and there were holes in the wall like where I think it like adhered to. What happened to the door? Like, you'd think like if something happened and the door fell off the hinge, the door would still be in there and it just needed to be repaired, but the door was completely gone. So no door. If you have guests over, whatever, just don't look. There was another area in the interior. So when I look at windows, I look to make sure that all the seals are good and that there's, they're functional. Well, there were windows in the overcap area and it was weird because they were separating. There were these huge gaps and there were cracks around the window seal itself, the actual window, and there were big gaps. So that was definitely a red flag too. Number 4, the electrical, and this just wraps everything up and seals the deal. I couldn't test the air conditioner until it got the generator, but I couldn't get the generator working until I got the propane. So the generator got turned on and then the air conditioner got turned on and it worked at first. It was working and I was able to let it run for a little while and even test the delta T, which is the efficiency of the intake and outtake. And it had good delta T. So then I said, okay, well, I'm going to turn on the microwave and I like to run it on a load to see how it handles it. Well, I didn't like how it handled it on microwave. So I went ahead and shut it off and I shut off the air conditioner. I then just ran the microwave and it ran. The microwave got done. I tested the 1 minute of water cooking and I got finished with that and went to turn the air conditioner back on. Now at this point, the compressor wouldn't turn on. So it just started to run the air conditioner, but then no compressor. And then all of a sudden I look over and I see the dead battery, which I haven't gotten to yet. The coach had a dead battery of 11.9. And I see that it's no longer, the transfer switch is no longer working. Like it just stopped. So what ended up happening was it blew the breaker. The breaker popped at the generator. So I turned off the generator and I went back out. I checked the breaker. I put it back into position and I started the generator again and it was running. And I turned on the air conditioner again. Pop. Went back to normal voltage, like the dead battery voltage, 11.9. and it was not working. The transfer switch was no longer working. So I tried it one more time just to make sure, and it popped the breaker. So at this point in my inspection, I am not going to attempt that any longer. I am going to write it up because there's something wrong. And when breakers keep popping, you have to know there's some other issue going on electrically. You don't want to continue to pop the breaker. So I could not do any more of my inspection with any running air conditioner, and it was 100 degrees in the afternoon. And I was like, okay, I have 110 because I had that at least, so I could have that plugged in so I could at least test the outlets and stuff. But I didn't have any working air conditioner. I couldn't even test those systems anymore. So now we are looking around the interior, and I noticed the control panel in the bedroom doesn't work. And it doesn't work any of the lights or any of the functions on it, so that's out. I noticed that in the front cab area that what I do is I test the seat function. So the electrical seat, does it move forward? Does it move back? Does it do all the functions that it says it does? Well, it wasn't doing any of the functions. And then when I started the motor and I looked on the interior, it had like a warning label or a warning sign there about that the functions of the seat needed to go to a workshop. I need to go to a workshop because of the functions of the seat. So I was like, okay, well, they're not working and it needs to be repaired. Then I also noticed that the TVs didn't work. Neither of them did. I'm like, there are definitely a lot of electrical things going on. But to top it off, when I went underneath the RV, there were loose wires dangling down that had been disconnected and were literally dragging on the ground. So I wonder if that had anything to do with any of the electrical issues. So, you guys, tell me, would you buy this RV? How much would you pay for the RV? I mean, come on. This is crazy. I mean, I don't know. This may be, I've had some doozies. And I love when I get this content for you that I can showcase all the things I find. But this one had all the things I can find packed into one RV inspection. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I was excited to make this for you. And hey, please like and subscribe and share this video. If you would like to book an RV inspector, go to rvhelp.com. You can go to my website at debsrvservices.net. You can subscribe to my monthly newsletter and get a free checklist. Thank you for being here, and I will see you on the next video. Have a great week.